Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and all welcome aboard the Eastern Express. On this episode, we dive into the battle for Pokrovsk, a strategic Ukrainian city in the Donetsk region that has become a hotbed of fierce fighting. Now, you might be asking, why does Pokrovsk matter so much? Well, think of Pokrovsk as Ukraine's eastern Achilles heel. Russia's relentless assault on this city isn't just about gaining a few more square miles of territory. It's about cutting off a vital logistics hub that would cripple Ukrainian defenses in the Donbas region. With stakes this high, no wonder Kyiv's forces are deadly serious about saving this city. So, let's get to it. Here's our latest report.
Ukraine's commander-in-chief Alexander Syrsky claims that over the last 6 days, Russian forces have failed to advance even a single meter in the Pokrovsk direction. The commander sees that as proof of the efficiency of Ukraine's strategy. The eastern front near Pokrovsk has seen fierce battles for several months. Russians are hell-bent on capturing the city, given its importance as a logistical hub for Ukrainian forces. Russia's best-trained units are concentrated in the Pokrovsk area, but even they have been unable to make any progress under intense Ukrainian artillery fire. Meanwhile, fighting continues on the Russian territory in the Kursk region. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, claimed that Moscow had pulled over 60,000 troops into the Kursk region to repel Ukraine's incursion. The official said the goal of the Kursk maneuver was to divert Russian troops. The number of diverted Russian forces has allegedly doubled since the last score provided by Commander-in-Chief Syrsky. Zelensky also said that Ukrainian soldiers seized 600 Russian captives. In the Ukrainian city of Poltava, search and rescue operations at the site of a Russian missile attack concluded on Thursday. The bodies of the deceased victims are still being identified.
We asked them to show us the body. We said we wouldn't faint, but just wanted to make sure that it was him from his tattoos and birthmarks. It was him, but the head, the smartest part of him, was gone. I can't.
The death toll of the attack now stands at 55 people and 328 injured.
My condolences to all the families and friends. Law enforcement agencies and the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine are investigating all the circumstances of this tragedy. The Russians carried out this strike with 2 ballistic missiles. There was an air raid alert.
The missiles hit the Military Communications Institute and a neighboring medical facility. The educational institution building was partially destroyed.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Russia is advancing, albeit slowly, but make no mistake, this is critical for Ukraine. Ukrainian troops are facing an enemy that's desperate to take control of this strategic gateway. If Pokrovsk fails, Russia gets an open lane to push deeper into Ukraine's east, securing its southern flank and potentially forcing Ukrainian forces into a defensive scramble. Pokrovsk isn't just another city, it's a domino that Ukraine can't afford to lose. So, let's talk tactics, because things are getting complicated. The battle for Pokrovsk resembles Russia's previous strategies in Avdiivka and Bakhmut. They've surrounded the Ukrainian defenders in 3 directions, and some experts fear that unless Ukraine organizes a timely retreat, their forces might face encirclement. Fortunately, Ukrainian forces have been able to hold off the Russians so far, but it is a brutal fight out there. And by brutal, I don't just mean trench warfare. This is hands-to-hands artillery pounding hell. Speaking of hell, Pokrovsk residents have been giving a grim message. Get out now or face the possibility of getting trapped in a war zone. Ukraine's military officials have been warning civilians to evacuate as Russian forces inch closer. And it's not just about dodging artillery fire anymore. If Russia captures Pokrovsk, these civilians could face the same horrors seen in other occupied cities: forced conscription, displacement, or worse. This is a humanitarian nightmare that we've seen replayed too many times already. The train helping people leave the place has already been suspended, so the situation is only getting more difficult. And if you think this battle is contained to just Pokrovsk, think again. Russia's strategy here is part of a broader plan to secure the entirety of Donbas and keep Ukraine on the defensive. But there's one wild card. Russia's advances are coming at a cost. Russian troops are stretched thin, worn out after months of fighting with little to show for. They've been throwing everything they have at Pokrovsk without regrouping, without restocking supplies, and without a clear path to victory. It's like they're trying to win a marathon by sprinting the entire time, and we all know how that ends. Ukraine, however, is playing the long game. Their strategy is not just about defending Pokrovsk, but wearing down Russian forces through attrition. Ukrainian officials have said that over the last several days, Russian advances in Pokrovsk have stalled. The resilience of Ukraine's defenders in this critical sector is impressive. It's more than holding a line on a map. This is about sending a message to Russia that its relentless offensive is unsustainable. Ukraine is betting that Russia will run out of steam before they run out of land to defend. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Mihailo Seamus, Director of the New Geopolitics Research Network. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me.
So we're looking at the battle in the Pokrovsk region. It's a very critical juncture in Russia's push into Ukraine. Can you help us understand the importance of this area and what it means for Ukraine and for Russia?
Actually, yeah, it's the concentration of the Russian intentions on this area. I mean, the Pokrovsk direction. It's of course because Pokrovsk it's one of the important hub for railways, for communications, for logistics. But I need to say that actually Russia was trying to attack Ukraine on 6 or 7 direction on Donbas, but Ukrainian armed forces, they neutralized these directions. For example, it's Kupiansk direction, Toretsk, Chasiv Yar, Kurakhovo, Vuhledar, and other directions on the all of spectrum of the front line. Only one direction when they had a success, it's Pokrovsk direction. So that's why everybody is looking on it. And it's not so special important for Russia. It's only one direction when Russia is going to attack more and more because they had some success. But I need to say that last week, for last 6 days, they didn't have any meter for approaching to Ukrainian forces because Ukrainian troops stopped them on the front direction, and that's why Russia is trying to widen the flanks, especially on the southern flank, trying to secure the flanks on Pokrovsk direction, and of course they trying to attack on other direction, as I call now, and especially on Ugledar direction, which is also south area from Pokrovsk.
Right, thank you for helping us understand that, because like you said, we do have a narrative that is hyper-focused on the Pokrovsk region, but kind of have to keep in mind that this is perhaps due to the fact that Russian are gaining ground in this area only. One of the things that I've been reading about is the Russians' use of more kind of just, well, call it meat grinder to say the least, and putting more and more people in the front instead of using the armored vehicles and more kind of mechanical units. Is this a strategical decision, or is it just them running low on materials?
No, of course, strategic decision is to occupy all of Donbas, and actually, this is the goal for this year at least, and they trying to do it. But I'm sure that it's impossible already because of the tempo they had, and they have now, because as I told, Ukrainian armed forces stopped them on a 6 direction, and only one direction they're trying to continue. Now they're trying to shift the main intentions and pressure on southern direction to Ugledar. But using the small groups of soldiers, it's a tactical let's say model. It's a new tactical model. Why they use it? Because if you use the group of 2 or 3 soldiers, it's very difficult to use against them artillery, because they are moving fast. They're trying to be even effective against FPV drones. So Ukrainian forces using FPV drones to stop the infantry groups for 3-5 people. For artillery, it's tough because it's easier to stop armor vehicles by artillery, by anti-tank missiles. But if you look at the, for example, motorbikes with two soldiers moving very fast, sometimes it's impossible even to use rifles against them because they're trying to deep to some forest or some areas with trees and hidden there. And after this, next group, and Russians, they of course they losing a lot of soldiers in these exercises, but nevertheless, if you look at the map, they had some success mainly on Pokrovsk direction because of geographical specialities here, because they move from one hidden area to another, and it's pretty successful. For example, on southern direction, Ugledar, they cannot use these tactics because it's pretty open area, and it's impossible to run if you just a soldier without armor vehicles. So on the southern direction, they use a lot of armor, a lot of tanks, but this is even easier for Ukrainian forces because they use normal artillery, they use anti-tank missiles, they use FPV drones, and that's why they're losing a lot of armor vehicles on the southern direction, but they don't have so huge losses of armor vehicles on the Toretsk or Pokrovsk direction.
Thank you so much for breaking all of that down. And when it comes to the Donbas, a lot of discussion around it. Around the push into the Kursk region was described as a double-edged sword. One of the strategic plan was to perhaps redirect some of the forces, the Russian invaders, from the Donbas area back to defend the Kursk region, which doesn't seem to have come into fruition at the moment. Would you say that this incursion into Kursk is still a net positive in that front, or do you think that this might be strategically didn't achieve all it set out to do?
Yeah, I think the Kursk operation is continuous, pretty successful. It's just no information from this area, but as I know that Ukrainian forces continue to approach on the targets and goals which were write down by commanders. So as I understood, on the tactical level, Ukrainian forces is going to use geographical specialities of the territory, especially rivers, like a river Seine, which is very important for Ukrainian systematic approach on this area, and they use river Seine like a natural obstacle for Russian forces if they're trying to attack Ukrainian flanks. So it's impossible because river Seine is pretty deep, it's pretty wide. Just to go through it, they need to concentrate forces. They need to use a special engineer equipment, of course, because Ukrainian forces destroyed already all of bridges on this river. And this river actually goes just directly to Kursk, to the city Kursk. And it means that Ukraine forces could use this river just to approach on another areas of Kursk Oblast. But I think that most probable Ukrainian force won't go deeper to Russian territory because they need more long-range strikes. And as you know, United States still don't allow Ukrainian forces use American long-range deep strikes to Russian territory, and this is obstacle for Ukrainian forces. You cannot go further with infantry if you don't have a proper fire support, including deep strikes. So I think that they will continue to keep the so-called buffer zone in Kursk Oblast, maybe neighbor Bryansk Oblast, maybe to the left to Belgorod Oblast. So I think it's a pretty successful operation. And if you look at the map, Russian forces still cannot approach on 6 directions, and only on one direction they trying to have success. It means so they don't have a proper reserves yet, and now they have a dilemma. Just to collect another resource, even from Kursk Oblast, to allow Ukrainian forces go further to Russian territory and send them to Donbas, or maybe collect all of reserves from all of directions, but not from Pokrovsk, and send to Kursk Oblast. And can you imagine if Ukrainian forces will start a new operation, new surprising operation, asymmetric, shocking operation on other direction, not in Russian territory, but for example in south direction, where will find Russia new reserves. This is, I think it could be one of the plan of Ukrainian commander to create all of these problems with reserves for Russian troops, because they have a strategic goal to occupy Donbas. They need more and more troops, but they don't have a mobilization. I just remind you.
Right. And like you mentioned, even in the Pokrovsk region, the push has been halted for a while now. Do you see that the Russian troops are running out of steam? Do you think that they will take the approach to replenish these troops, or probably it's about time to pull out?
You know, the problem is that this is a not military operation. Of course, it's a political operation. It's total political operation, because Putin wants to have a strong position before new United States president will arrive to the office. So it means that they need to occupy all of Donbas. It was a task for Russian offensive operations since October 2023. And you look at the map and results of these operations, I'm sure it's not what Putin wanted from Russian generals. That's why I'm not sure that they can stop operations on Pokrovsk, Ugledar, or other directions on Donbas. They will send more and more troops to Donbas, and this could be a trap for them, because, as I told, Ukrainian forces now successfully continue operations Kursk, and of course it will be more and more be a trigger, political trigger for Russian elites, why Putin cannot secure the Russian territory, and more press on Putin to send more troops to Kursk Oblast. In this point, if Ukrainian commanders really has some plans to open another operations, new surprising operations on south, it will be a bad surprise for Russians, because they really will have big problems in Kursk Oblast, big problem in south, and of course they won't complete the task of Putin to occupy Donbas. So it will be a total disaster. Of course, we will see now how effective Ukrainian forces will conduct all of these plans, but at least we can try.
All right, thank you so much for this in-depth analysis. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us on Eastern Express. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East I don't want to miss. We begin with the charging of 5 Russian military officers for allegedly conducting cyber attacks on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine as early as January 2022. The FBI thinks the coordinated strike could have been Russia's first hostile action in the invasion.
It would be difficult to associate a campaign of cyber attacks on civilian infrastructure and Ukrainian computer systems with a harbinger of a Russian invasion. But the Russian plot carried out in January 2022 turned out to be just that. On Thursday, the US charged 5 Russian officers of the GRU military intelligence agency for allegedly conducting the campaign that targeted systems and infrastructure wholly unrelated to the military. Known as the Whispergate, the malware attack was intended to maim Ukraine's government and critical infrastructure by targeting financial systems, agriculture, emergency services, healthcare and schools. But the cyber campaign reached beyond Ukrainian territory, affecting computer systems in the US and other NATO members supporting Ukraine.
Russia's clumsy attempts at acting as if it still was the Soviet overlord of the Caucasus are convincing Armenia that it should seek closer cooperation with the West. With its nuclear power plant nearing the end of its lifespan, Yerevan is now openly exploring alternatives to a revamped deal it struck with Moscow last year.
Metsamor is an oldie nuclear power plant whose first unit went online in 1976. Its 2 units cover as much as 40% of Armenia's energy demand. Under a deal the country struck with Russia in late 2023, the facility is set for an upgrade that will extend its usability until 2036. But the Armenian-Azerbaijani peace process and Russia's sluggishness in its role of peacemaker made Yerevan officials eye alternatives. Building a new nuclear power plant with the US could be one, a topic that both countries' officials discussed already in July. A legal framework must yet be worked out before the deal-making is brought to another stage. On top of that, Armenian officials said they wanted to keep the door open for competitive bids. Should a Western contractor be selected, it would spell a symbolic break with Russia and reduction of energy dependence on the Kremlin. Today, the Caucasus country covers 80% of its energy needs with fossil fuels imported from Russia. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan has scheduled a referendum for October 6th to determine whether the country should erect its own nuclear plant to meet growing electricity demands.
Serbia's top officials are behaving increasingly schizophrenic. One week they vow to be on the path to the European Union. At the end of another, they say that Serbia is Russia's ally.
There are no both sides. We are on EU path.
This is what Serbia's President Alexander Vučić said last week at the GlobeSec conference in the Czech Republic. And this is what Serbia's Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Vulin told Russia's leader just 4 days later in Vladivostok.
As you know, Serbia is not only a strategic partner of Russia, Serbia is also an ally of Russia. And because of that, the pressure on us from the West is enormous. But the Serbia led by Alexander Vučić is a Serbia that will never become a member of NATO, that will never impose sanctions on the Russian Federation, and that will never allow its territories carry out any anti-Russian actions.
The European Union warned Serbia on Thursday that maintaining strong ties with Russia was incompatible with the Balkan country's aspiration to join the EU. On the same day, Serbia's President Vučić turned down, after over a weekly suspense, Putin's invitation to a high-level BRICS meeting in late October, taking place in Tatarstan. Excuse? Important guests. One wonders, though, could there be a more important guest for Serbia than a Russian one?
The Romanian government is finishing up formalities required to hand over one of its new Patriot missile systems to war-torn Ukraine. Here are the details.
As Russia continues waging its war, boosting Ukraine's air defense capabilities is vital to the protection of innocent lives and critical infrastructure. Romania will soon contribute to this goal by donating one of its only 2 Patriot missile systems. On Thursday, Romanian President Klaus Iohannis signed a bill allowing for the donation. The system is scheduled for deployment as part of Ukraine's air defenses. Now the Romanian government will issue an order for the donation to be carried out. Bucharest hopes its allies will substitute the donated Patriot system with a new one at a later date.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.